Joining me now is Eric Mandel, the director of the Middle East Political Information Network, and Thane Rosenbaum, Middle East analyst and distinguished fellow at the New York University School of Law. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you, Michelle.
Eric, let's start with you. Are you surprised that this is what it came to?
I am a little surprised. I thought that Bibi would find some way, because especially with the immunity bill hanging out there, and he needed it. But Lieberman seems to be one in a long line of people that have been really angry at Bibi, of a history from Naftali Bennett. You go through a long list, and there seems to be maybe some personal animus here, and maybe some that I think Lieberman wants to position himself as the champion of secular, traditional Israelis, and that he's looking for maybe to be prime minister one day and to put himself in a position that way that his principles are so important that it's more important than forming a government with Bibi.
Do you think that gamble is going to pay off for him, Thane? Lieberman saying that he's not going to budge on his demand for ultra-Orthodox Jews to be part of that military conscription. And that is certainly a sentiment that's popular with a lot of Israelis, not just his supporters. A lot of Israelis agree with him that ultra-Orthodox Jews should not be exempt from military service.
This is a real problem within the Israeli right anyway, right? Because Shas, United Torah, Judaism, there are a number of issues that are important to them. Who becomes a Jew, who's a rabbi, who gets to pray at the Western Wall, that is not in sync with a lot of Israelis. On the other hand, if Netanyahu can pull off this victory and actually peel away some votes from the religious parties, Lieberman will be out of the government entirely. So it is a gamble for him. He will come off as principled on this position on, are we a secular state or a theocracy? But he could wind up being out of government. On the other hand, we've learned from the last administration, he's quite comfortable leaving government, right? He abandoned his post, withdrew from his post as former defense minister. And so in some ways, maybe this isn't so unexpected.
Right. And again, to Thane's point, let's keep in mind that it was Avigdor Lieberman that triggered the previous elections in April, again, on what he saw as a matter of principle. He was not happy with the way that the Israeli government responded to the continued violence coming from Hamas, coming from Gaza. He wasn't happy that yet another ceasefire was reached with Hamas after Hamas attacked Israel. And he pulled out his defense minister. Hence, we had the April elections. Again, he's sticking to his principles regarding this drafting of ultra-Orthodox Jews. Now, Eric, many people are berating him for being selfish and causing this whole mess. But on the other hand, should he be applauded for a politician that's actually sticking to his principles?
Well, I think this is brought out into the fore, just as Thane was alluding to, that we have a huge divide within Israel. We have the ultra-Orthodox, not to be confused with the religious Zionists, not to be confused with the traditional or the secular right or the secular left. All of those really would be more than happy to follow Lieberman on this point. They don't want to have more monies going to the ultra-Orthodox, and they feel that in a country like this, that people, especially so many of the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, are non-Zionists, that they need to participate in this country, if not in the IDF, but in civil service. And they choose not to. And so I think that Lieberman is following a very popular position right now.
And a national unity government would address just that thing. It would thwart the growing power of the ultra-Orthodox parties because they wield so much influence because they're needed as coalition parties. But a national unity government between potentially blue and white and Likud, could that happen with Netanyahu still as the head of Likud?
Probably not, but it would, in fact, foreshadow a kind of disgust either with Netanyahu or the religious right. If Netanyahu actually can convince the Israeli public that I am still your statesman, your representative on the foreign stage, the man who has engineered a successful economy, you want me as your prime minister, you voted for right-wing parties thinking I would be prime minister, that blew up in your face. Now it's your turn to actually vote for me directly. If he can make that case, he'll be prime minister again. If not, Lieberman is actually not so unsympathetic to some of the left-wing parties on some degree. And you're right, he might actually be able to be peeled away into a more centrist blue and white party that can form a government.
But Eric, it's not just talk in terms of what Netanyahu is saying he's done for Israel. He has led Israel to tremendous success, certainly from an economic perspective. From a security perspective, you could argue that he's made significant gains for Israel as well. His strong relationships with world leaders have put Israel in a more favorable position. Is that enough, though? Do you see the Israeli people just having Netanyahu fatigue at this point?
Well, remember, they're not voting directly for a prime minister. That was a short-lived event. So you are voting for a party, and the parties have never had a majority. So there was a majority of 65 right-leaning parties, but nobody actually voted directly for Bibi.
Right.
But when you look at Lieberman joining Blue and White, if a Bugayai alone could join a Blue and White, then a Lieberman could join a Blue and White. It may be a transition that's happening. You know, there's of the 120 Knesset members, is Bibi Netanyahu the only one who could be a prime minister? Sooner or later, somebody else will come. He's going to be the longest-serving prime minister sometime this summer, passing David Ben-Gurion. So I think events are conspiring at this point that almost anything is possible. And the other thing is, if there's a September 17th election, and then in October is the intent to indict, becomes the indictment, and then it takes over 40 or 60 or 90 days to make a coalition, Bibi will not be protected. And then that means somebody like a Gideon Sa'ar could rise.
Right.
And then there could be another election. So this is in totally uncharted territory here.
And it all comes, Thane, as the Trump administration is trying to go ahead with this peace plan. Very bad timing. Jared Kushner visiting Israel today. We know that they held off on releasing the plan to see how the April elections resolve themselves. And now it's certainly back to square one on that front. How do you see the Trump administration proceeding or not proceeding now? Well,
I would be surprised if they unveil the plan until after the new Israeli elections, in part because they're counting on Netanyahu as remaining as prime minister. Everything is contingent on this. And remember, let us not forget, you know, Netanyahu's going to make this case clear to the Israeli public. I was the prime minister when Syria was become a sovereign part, the Golan became a sovereign part of Israel.
Yeah.
The move of the embassy base to Jerusalem, the decertification of the Iran deal. My connection to Trump and Putin is solid. And do you really want to change drivers at this point? Especially with a plan that we don't know what it looks like, and I'm the one that has the stronger relationship with the Trump family.
And that relationship certainly has stood in good ground. That is certainly a point that he keeps on stressing. And he's right to make that point again, saying it today. 30 seconds after Knesset was dissolved, he went on a little bit of an election speak, stressing how he's putting together this trilateral summit between Russia and the U.S. to consolidate Israel's security. So in terms of representing Israel on the world stage, you can't deny that Prime Minister Netanyahu has done a solid job. We'll see what the voters have to say. Thank you so much. As always, Thane Rosenbaum and Eric Mandel. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Michelle.